I still remember the long drive back to my mother's house, the same two-story place I grew up in, sitting at the end of a quiet suburban street. I was in my early 30s, tired from a breakup that hit harder than I wanted to admit, and broke enough that I couldn't pretend I was fine anymore. Moving back home felt like failure, even though my mother never said it out loud. She just opened the door, gave a small smile, and told me the guest room was already made. The house looked almost exactly the same wooden table, same curtains, same smell of laundry soap mixed with cinnamon. But the relationship between us was not the same. There was a quiet tension in the kitchen, this old heaviness that sat between every sentence we spoke. We had gone years picking at each other over small things, and now all those small things had grown into distance. On my first evening back, I heard voices from the living room. My mother had her weekly book club, a group of older women who came over every Wednesday with novels under their arms and opinions that filled the whole house. They talked about strong female characters, power, sacrifice, inner growth. Their voices carried through the doorway with the confidence of women who had lived long lives and earned the right to be loud. I stayed in the corner, scrolling my phone, pretending not to listen. They were laughing, debating, raising questions about why certain male characters never understood the women in their lives. My mother glanced at me once with a look I knew too well, the one that said she wished I understood what they were talking about. I kept my eyes on the screen and tried to ignore how out of place I felt. The house felt familiar, but I did not fit inside it the same way anymore. And that quiet mismatch was only the beginning. The following Wednesday, I was in the kitchen pouring myself a glass of water when I heard my mother's voice break in the living room. Not loud, not angry, just that sharp emotional crack she gets when she's been holding something in for too long. I stepped closer without meaning to. Her book club ladies were sitting in a circle around her, books in their laps, their warm faces turned toward her like a support group. She was wiping the corner of her eye as she talked. She said she loved me, but she felt like I never really heard her. She said that every time she tried to explain a female point of view, I treated it like it was just another opinion instead of something real she lived through. The room went quiet in that heavy way only older women can make it, where silence feels like the truth settling on the table. I froze in the doorway. One of the ladies noticed me and smiled kindly, then looked back at my mother. Another woman spoke first, her voice gentle but direct. She asked me how often I had truly listened to women without trying to defend myself. Then another asked how often I had ever tried to live life the way women had to live every day. The questions were calm, but they hit hard because there were no easy answers. My mother looked at me with tears she was trying to hide. She said she wished I understood her world better, that I could see life through her eyes just once. The room filled with that soft kind of sympathy older women have, the kind that wraps around you even when you didn't ask for it. Then one of the ladies leaned forward, the one who normally led the discussions. Her tone was firm but caring. She told me that if I really loved my mother, then I needed to prove it. Not with gifts, not with promises, with action. She said they had an idea, something unusual, but something that could change everything if I took it seriously. She explained that for the next few months, I would join their book club, not as myself, but as a feminine presenting guest. She said it would not be a joke or humiliation. It would be a living experiment, a chance to understand what it feels like to be seen as a woman. She said I would keep a private journal about the way people reacted to me, how my body language changed, how the world shifted around me when I was perceived that way. Another woman nodded and added that this would build confidence, not take it away. She said stepping into a feminine role teaches self-awareness, emotional strength, and empathy in ways nothing else does. She said I would finally understand what women feel every day. My mother just sat there, eyes shining, hoping I would say yes. And for the first time in years, I saw how much my distance had hurt her. When the ladies first suggested the idea, I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I just stood there, feeling my mother's eyes on me. I could tell she didn't want me to reject it in anger. She was hoping I would at least think about it. I walked away without answering, but the look on her face stayed with me for days. A few evenings later, she brought it up again. This time her voice was softer, almost careful, like she was touching something fragile. She told me she did not want to force me. She only wanted us to understand each other better. She said this experiment could heal years of distance if I let it. She spoke about the nights she cried alone, wondering why we had fallen so far apart. I felt my chest tighten with guilt. She was not attacking me. She was reaching for me. I tried resisting at first. I told her it sounded strange. I told her I did not know how far they wanted to take it. She just nodded and said she understood, but she also said she wished I would try. Not for them. For us. That was what broke me. I wanted to repair the damage I had caused. I wanted her to feel loved again. So I agreed. When the first feminine evening came, the women gathered earlier than usual. They were warm, smiling, almost excited, but in a gentle way. One of them said before dressing me, I needed to take a shower and remove all my body hair. I almost refused right there. The words stuck in my throat. I was ready to shake my head and say this was going too far. But then I looked at my mother. She was standing with her hands folded, trying so hard not to push me. But the hope in her eyes was impossible to ignore. She wanted this more than she could say. So I went to the bathroom. I turned on the shower and stood there for a long moment, steam rising around me. It felt unreal. I was a grown man shaving his body because a group of older women asked me to. But it also felt like this strange doorway to something bigger. I shaved my legs, my arms, my chest, everything. The skin felt unfamiliar and almost too smooth. When I stepped out, the towel around my waist felt different against me. The women were waiting with clothes laid out neatly on the bed. Nothing dramatic. A soft sweater, a long skirt that brushed my calves, and light makeup. They said I would still feel like myself, just softened. They worked slowly, respectfully. One touched up my eyebrows. Another brushed a little color onto my cheeks. Someone added a bit of gloss. They kept talking to me kindly the whole time, never once making fun of me. When they were done, I looked in the mirror and felt something I could not describe at first. I still looked like me, but gentler, softer around the edges. It startled me how easily my appearance shifted with a few changes. When I walked into the living room, the book club greeted me like a special guest. Not the stubborn son who never listened, a guest they were proud to welcome into their circle. They did not give me a feminine name yet, but they looked at me differently, with expectation, with care. One of the ladies asked quietly, "How are you feeling right now?" I took a breath and tried to explain it honestly. I said I felt nervous. I felt exposed. I felt strangely lighter without all that hair. I felt embarrassed, but also seen in a new way, like I was standing at the edge of something important. I said I did not know what this experiment would do to me, but I could already feel the shift inside. And for the first time in years, every woman in that room listened. Really listened. The weeks that followed felt strangely steady, almost like slipping into a new routine I never expected to have. Every Wednesday evening, I joined the book club dressed in quiet, simple, feminine outfits the ladies helped put together. A soft sweater here, a flowing skirt there, a touch of makeup that made my features gentler without erasing who I was. At first, it still felt like a costume. But as the days passed, the feeling changed. I started keeping a daily journal like the ladies suggested. Nothing complicated, just short entries about how people reacted to me when I walked into a room, the difference in eye contact, the softness in some voices, the assumptions strangers made, even the small shift in my own body language. I caught myself crossing my legs differently, tilting my head slightly when I listened, holding my arms closer to my body when standing in line. None of it was fast. It just happened. Some nights my mother quietly asked if she could read a few pages. Not everything, just the parts one felt comfortable sharing. And when I handed her those pages, I saw something new in her expression, not disappointment, not frustration, just a kind of gratitude, like she finally saw me trying in a way I never had before. She would read slowly, her thumb brushing the corner of the paper the same way she used to when reading my school projects. One evening, she placed her hand on mine and said, "I see how much heart you are putting into this. Thank you." That one sentence stayed with me all night. What I did not know was that behind the scenes, she had been talking to one of the book club ladies who worked in a medical office. They wanted to help me understand the feminine role more deeply, not to change me, not to push me into something I did not want, but to let me feel the emotional layers women live with. After several quiet conversations, they arranged a consultation for low-dose hormones. When my mother brought it up, she did not rush me. She sat across from me at the kitchen table with her hands folded, the same way she had when I first moved back home. She explained the idea carefully. She said it was not punishment. It was an option, a tool to help me connect more honestly to what I was experiencing. I resisted at first. It felt like a line I was not sure I should cross. But she kept talking in that soft, sincere voice she only used when something truly mattered. She reminded me of the journal entries, the way I said shifts were already happening, the way I admitted the experiment was teaching me more than I expected. After a long conversation that lasted late into the night, I agreed. The first dose was small, barely anything a stranger would notice, but I felt it in subtle ways. My emotions sat closer to the surface. My thoughts felt a little rounder, softer, more reflective. It was not dramatic. It was not overwhelming. It was just enough to make me feel the role from the inside, instead of only wearing it on the outside. And somehow, that made everything more real. The weeks after starting the low-dose hormones felt different in a way that was hard to explain. Nothing dramatic happened, but small shifts showed up quietly. My skin felt a little softer. My emotions sat closer to the surface. My body language changed without me thinking about it. Even when I was alone in my room, it became harder to switch back into the old version of myself. My mother noticed before I did. She watched the way I moved around the kitchen and said softly that the experiment was no longer just something I was doing for Wednesday nights. It was settling into my everyday life. And then she suggested something I never expected. She wanted me to go out in public as a woman. Not far. Not dramatic. Just a simple test, a cafe or a bookstore, somewhere quiet, somewhere I could sit and observe how people reacted without pressure. Her voice was calm, not demanding, and it made it hard to say no. The book club ladies loved the idea. They turned my next dressing session into something that felt more like a bonding moment than an assignment. They brought clothes from their closets and even a few new items they thought would suit me. They picked out a soft blouse, a long flowing skirt that moved when I walked, and a pair of comfortable heels that gave me a gentle lift. They helped me with makeup too, not heavy makeup, just enough to frame my face and soften the angles. A little foundation, a bit of mascara, a touch of gloss. One of the ladies brushed my hair back and pinned it so that it framed my face in a delicate way. They fussed over me like a team getting someone ready for an important moment. By the time they were done, I looked in the mirror and saw a version of myself I barely recognized but strangely understood. The clothes were feminine but not flashy. The makeup was gentle. The overall look felt believable, real. We chose a small local cafe for the first outing. My mother walked beside me, keeping her pace slow. My heart was pounding, but she placed her hand on my arm and said, "Just breathe. You look like you belong." When we stepped inside, something unexpected happened. No one stared. No one whispered. No one looked confused. A woman behind the counter smiled at me the same way she smiled at every other customer. A man who walked past me barely glanced in my direction. A pair of teenagers at a corner table didn't react at all. People simply saw me as a quiet woman walking in with her mother. I sat at a small table near the window, trying to look relaxed while my nerves buzzed under the surface. But as minutes passed, the pressure shifted into something softer. I felt strangely safe, seen but not judged, a part of the crowd instead of someone standing out. It surprised me how natural it felt. My mother kept looking at me with that proud, emotional expression she had been wearing more often lately. She whispered, "See? The world can read you this way." And for the first time, I believed her. When we left the cafe, I caught my reflection in the window. Not the stubborn son she used to argue with. Not the man who came home after losing everything. A softer version. Someone learning to understand a world he had ignored for too long, and the world somehow accepted her without hesitation. Thanksgiving arrived before I was ready. The weeks of dressing for the book club and the quiet trip to the cafe had changed more inside me than I wanted to admit. My presentation had become softer, calmer, harder to turn off. My mother noticed every shift, and when she said she wanted me to stay in that feminine presentation for the holiday dinner, my heart sank. I told her family was different. Strangers in a cafe did not matter, but relatives would talk. They would judge. They would ask questions I did not want to answer. She listened, but stayed firm. She said she wanted the family to see the effort I had been making. She said the experiment was about honesty and growth, and I should not hide from the people who claimed to love me. Her voice carried a mixture of pride and fear, and that combination pushed me into saying yes, even though every part of me was tense. The book club ladies helped me get ready that afternoon. They chose a soft winter dress, warm enough for the season, but simple enough to not draw unnecessary attention. They added light makeup, brushed out my hair, and hugged me before I left, telling me I was stronger than I thought. When we arrived at my aunt's house, the reactions came fast. My aunt froze in the doorway, eyes wide. She tried to smile but failed. My uncle cleared his throat 3 times before saying hello. My cousins stared openly, whispering among themselves. One of them asked if it was a joke. Another said nothing and just looked uncomfortable. But not everyone reacted that way. My older cousin, Sarah, stepped forward first. She hugged me gently and said, "You look nice." Her tone was sincere, not mocking. She asked if I felt nervous and told me she was proud of me for trying something brave. That small kindness hit harder than the judgment. It made my eyes sting. Throughout dinner, the room was split. Some relatives kept stealing glances, their expressions tight. Others tried to talk to me like everything was normal. I could feel both reactions like 2 different temperatures against my skin. The softness made me emotional. The judgment made me shrink into myself. After we got home, everything crashed down. My mother and I ended up in the kitchen, arguing quietly at first, then louder. Years of resentment surfaced. She told me she had spent half her life trying to help me understand her, and I never listened. I told her she kept pushing me into roles I was not sure I wanted. She said this experiment was finally bringing us closer, and she did not want me to retreat now. I said she had no idea how hard the dinner had been. She cried. I yelled. She yelled back. It all came out while I was standing there in full feminine presentation, makeup still on, hair pinned the way the book club ladies had left it, the dress hugging me in a way that made everything feel too real. Then her voice broke, not in anger, in hurt. She said, "I just want you to let me in. That is all I have ever wanted." The words cut right through me. I stood there shaking, not from anger, but from the weight of everything we had never said. She reached out and held my hands, her eyes shining with the same mixture of love and fear she had the first night I moved back home. And for the first time, I realized this experiment was not just about femininity. It was about finally facing the truth between us. A few days passed after the Thanksgiving argument, and the house finally settled into a quieter rhythm. My mother and I were still tender around each other, but something had cracked open in a good way. We were gentler. We listened more. We apologized without defensiveness. The distance between us had softened, even though the wounds were still visible. When Wednesday came, the book club gathered like always, but the energy felt different. They chose a novel that mirrored everything we had been going through as a family, a story about identity, reinvention, and the fragile hope of second chances. Listening to them talk about it made the room feel warm, almost sacred. I sat among them in my soft sweater and long skirt, my hair brushed behind my ears, makeup light and natural. I felt calmer than I expected. The tension from the holiday had shifted into something quieter, something reflective. During a pause in the discussion, one of the older women looked at me with a thoughtful expression. Her voice was gentle, almost maternal. She said that I had been joining them for months now, not pretending, not mocking, but truly trying to understand. And then she asked a question so simple and soft that it landed right in my chest. "When you live in this feminine role with us, what name feels right for you?" My breath caught in my throat. I had never imagined naming myself. I had been presenting as a woman, dressing as one, learning the emotional shifts, but a name felt like something deeper, something rooted. Another woman added that names shape how we see ourselves, that the right one can open a door. My mother was quiet at first, watching me with a mixture of pride and nervousness, like she did not want to push me, but hoped I would step forward on my own. I thought about it, about my journals, about the mirror, about the way the world treated me at the cafe, about the argument on Thanksgiving where my emotions came out easier than ever before. Something inside me had been shifting, but I had not named it. Literally, my mother finally spoke. She said she once had a favorite name picked out when she thought she might have a daughter. She never told me that. Her voice shook a little when she said it. She whispered the name softly, almost like she was afraid it would break if she said it too loud. The name felt warm, familiar, safe, like it had been waiting somewhere inside me all along. I nodded slowly, my throat tightening. That one. The women smiled, some with tears in their eyes. They asked if they could use it for me during club meetings. I agreed, still trying to steady my breathing. Then came the moment that changed everything. My mother turned toward me, her eyes soft and shining, and she said the name out loud for the very first time. She said it with complete pride, no hesitation, no worry, pride. Hearing her say it felt like something inside me unlocked. A small shift, a deep breath. A quiet truth I had been holding back without realizing it. The room seemed to get warmer. The women's smiles felt like a blanket around me, and my mother's voice became the emotional center of the whole experiment. For the first time, I did not feel like I was just playing a role. I felt like I was becoming someone I had never let exist before. Months passed faster than I expected. What started as an experiment now lived in my everyday life. My journal was almost full, pages covered in thoughts about eye contact, posture, emotional shifts, and the way the world reacted to me when it saw the softer version of who I was becoming. The low-dose hormones had worked gently, but the changes were real. I felt calmer, more open, more tuned into the world around me. The book club no longer treated me like a guest or a project. They saw me as one of them. They called me by my feminine name without hesitation. And every time they did, something inside me settled a little more. My place in that circle felt natural, warm, and steady. But the experiment had an end date, and it was approaching fast. My mother brought it up one afternoon while we were both sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where so many arguments had happened over the years. Now it felt different, softer. She had 2 mugs of tea between us, and she kept glancing at my journal, which sat nearby with a ribbon tucked into the last page. She said the end of the experiment did not have to mean the end of everything I had discovered. She said the point had never been to force me into anything. It was about healing both of us, about understanding each other after years of distance, about giving me a chance to step into a new perspective and see life the way she had begged me to for so long. She asked how I felt, not as her son, not as her experiment, but as the person sitting in front of her in a soft sweater and makeup that now felt natural on my skin. I did not answer right away. My reflection in the window showed a version of myself I had grown used to. My name, the feminine one the book club had given me, echoed in my mind with a kind of calm I never expected. The hormones, the clothing, the reactions from strangers, the warmth from the women who welcomed me every week. All of it had shaped me in ways I could not deny anymore. This had started as a way to fix my relationship with my mother. But sitting there with her, I realized something heavier and deeper. Fixing our relationship had never been only about understanding women. It had been about allowing her to see the parts of me I had always hidden and allowing myself to see them, too. She reached across the table and held my hand, her thumb brushing the side of my wrist the same way she used to when I was little. She said we did not need to decide the future that day. We only needed to acknowledge what had changed. I nodded, feeling a quiet truth settle inside me. The experiment's timeline might end, but the journey I had stepped into was still unfolding. My feminine name no longer felt borrowed. It felt earned. It felt right. It felt like something I was growing into day by day. The chapter closes there, with me sitting beside my mother, realizing that this had never been about pretending to be a woman.